The year 2187 brought darkness to humanity like never before. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Europa, and the scars still burned fresh in every survivor's memory. The Krell Dominion had arrived without warning, their ships tearing through human defenses like paper. Earth survived but barely. 200,000 souls perished in the void, and the Krell promised to return with greater force. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his salvage vessel, the Pathfinder, watching debris drift past his viewport. Twisted metal and frozen bodies tumbled in the silent graveyard near Jupiter's orbit. His crew worked in somber quiet, recovering what technology they could from the wreckage. Every scrap might help humanity survive the next attack. Lisa Grant, his chief engineer, called from the engine room. Her voice crackled through the intercom with barely contained exhaustion. They had been working 16-hour shifts for weeks now, and it showed in every word. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and answered, asking if she had found anything useful in the latest debris field. The tactical officer, Peter Hayes, sat at his station with haunted eyes. He had watched his brother die during the Europa battle, incinerated when a Krell plasma beam cut through his ship's hull. Peter rarely spoke anymore, just did his job with mechanical precision. Sometimes Jake caught him staring at nothing, lost in memories of fire and screaming. Amy Chen hunched over her science console, analyzing energy signatures from the battlefield. The young woman had graduated top of her class just 6 months before the war began. Now she spent her days cataloging death and destruction. Her fingers flew across holographic displays, sorting through data that represented thousands of lost lives. Carlos Rivera checked medical supplies in the small infirmary. The doctor had treated more combat injuries in 3 months than most physicians saw in entire careers. His hand still shook sometimes when he slept, remembering the soldiers he could not save. But during waking hours he remained steady and professional, ready for whatever horrors came next. The Pathfinder's sensors suddenly registered an unusual energy signature deeper in the debris field. Amy called out the reading, her voice rising with something that might have been excitement. Jake ordered the ship to investigate, and they moved carefully through the wreckage toward the source. What they found made everyone on the bridge fall silent. A massive ship drifted in the darkness over 2 kilometers long and still radiating power. The hull bore the distinctive organic curves of Krell design, but something was wrong with it. Scorch marks covered entire sections, and gaping holes revealed darkened corridors within. The vessel looked like it had been torn apart from the inside. Jake felt his heart pound as he studied the derelict. This was a Krell warship, abandoned and adrift. The implications made his mind race. If they could recover this vessel, study its technology, humanity might gain the edge they desperately needed. He made the decision quickly, ordering his crew to prepare boarding equipment. They would explore the alien ship before reporting it to Earth Defense Command. Peter objected, citing protocols that required them to wait for military support. Jake understood the concern but rejected it firmly. Other salvage crews operated in this area, and the Krell might send forces to recover their lost ship. Time was their enemy now. They had to move fast or lose this opportunity forever. The boarding team suited up in the cargo bay. Jake led personally, bringing Lisa, Peter, and Amy with him. Carlos stayed aboard the Pathfinder to monitor their life signs and maintain communication. The 4 humans crossed the void between ships, magnetic boots clanking on alien hull plating as they approached a breach in the derelict's side. Inside, darkness greeted them. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, revealing corridors that seemed more grown than built. Krell architecture followed biological patterns, all curves and organic shapes that made human eyes uncomfortable. The gravity fluctuated wildly, sometimes pulling them down, other times leaving them floating. Atmospheric sensors showed vacuum in some sections and toxic gases in others. They moved deeper into the ship, following power conduits that still glowed faintly with alien energy. Lisa scanned everything, her equipment recording measurements and readings. The Krell built their technology using principles humanity barely understood. Every piece of data they gathered was precious beyond measure. Amy discovered the central computer core on the 3rd deck. Banks of crystalline processors hummed with minimal power, still processing information even after the ship's apparent death. She connected her portable equipment and began downloading data. The alien encryption was formidable, but she thought she could break it given enough time. The files might contain weapon schematics, navigation charts, maybe even intelligence about Krell space. Peter explored the weapon systems while the others worked. The armory was massive, filled with devices whose purposes he could only guess. One chamber held what appeared to be the primary weapon, a complex array of gravitational lens arrays connected to the ship's main power core. He had seen this weapon fire during the Battle of Europa, watched it tear human ships apart with invisible force. Now he stood next to it, close enough to touch. Suddenly, the ship's systems began activating around them. Red lights flashed in alien patterns along the walls. A deep thrumming sound vibrated through the deck plating. Jake shouted orders to retreat, but before they could move, defensive systems came online. Automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments, their targeting sensors sweeping the corridors with hostile intent. The team ran for their lives through twisting passages as energy weapons fired behind them. Lisa worked frantically with her equipment, trying to hack the defensive grid and shut it down. Amy transmitted data to the Pathfinder as fast as her connection allowed, knowing they might not survive to deliver it personally. Peter covered their retreat, his training kicking in despite the fear coursing through his veins. They reached an intersection where the passage split in 3 directions. The turrets were closing in from behind, and more activated ahead. They were trapped. Jake felt desperation claw at his chest. They had come so far, discovered so much, and now they would die in this alien tomb without ever sharing what they had learned. Peter saw a neural interface port near one of the weapon control stations. The Krell connected directly to their ships, controlling them with thought alone. It was insane, probably suicidal, but he did not see another choice. He pulled off his helmet despite Amy's screams of protest and jammed the alien connector against his temple. Pain exploded through his skull like lightning. The ship's systems flooded into his mind, a torrent of data and sensation far beyond human comprehension. But within that chaos, he found the defensive grid controls. With a mental command that felt like tearing out his own nerves, he shut down the automated weapons. The turrets powered down, their lights fading to darkness. Peter collapsed, blood running from his nose and ears. Jake caught him before he hit the deck, checking for vital signs. The man's pulse was weak but steady. They had to get him back to the Pathfinder immediately. Lisa and Amy grabbed Peter's arms while Jake led them back through the corridors to their entry point. Carlos waited in the cargo bay with medical equipment ready. He stabilized Peter's condition but could not wake him. The neural interface had done something to his brain, put him into a deep coma. His vital signs were stable, but nobody knew if he would ever wake up again. Jake stood on the bridge as the Pathfinder towed the massive Krell warship toward Earth. His crew had accomplished the impossible, but the cost weighed heavily on his conscience. Peter lay unconscious in medical, possibly brain damaged forever. Yet they had no choice but to continue. This alien vessel might be humanity's only hope for survival. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the communication screen, his expression grave. He listened to Jake's report in silence, then immediately classified everything at the highest security level. A secret task force would study the captured ship. Jake and his crew were sworn to secrecy and assigned to the project. They called it the Prometheus Initiative. The Krell warship disappeared into a hidden facility inside the asteroid Vesta. Thousands of personnel descended on the vessel, eager to unlock its secrets. But Jake felt a cold certainty in his gut. The Krell would come looking for their lost ship. The storm was gathering, and humanity had perhaps 18 months before it broke over them with terrible fury. Their only weapon was this broken alien derelict, and nobody knew if it would be enough. 6 months crawled by like years inside the asteroid Vesta. The massive space rock had been hollowed out and transformed into humanity's most secret facility. Thousands of scientists and engineers worked day and night on the captured Krell warship. They called it the Warden now, and it dominated the central chamber like a sleeping giant waiting to wake. Jake Morrison wore the insignia of commander now, promoted for his discovery of the alien vessel. His small salvage crew had expanded into full departments with hundreds of personnel under their command. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders every moment. So many people depending on decisions he made, and one wrong choice could doom them all. Lisa Grant commanded the engineering division with 300 technicians at her disposal. She stood before the Warden's massive power core daily, trying to understand technology that seemed like magic. The Krell used exotic matter in their reactors, substances that humanity could not even detect properly with current instruments. Every measurement brought more questions than answers. Amy Chen led the cryptography teams working to crack the alien databases. The Krell encrypted everything with quantum algorithms that shifted constantly. She had broken through the first 7 layers of security, but estimated at least 20 more remained. Her eyes burned from staring at holographic code for 16 hours straight, but she refused to rest. Somewhere in those files lay the secrets that could save Earth. Peter Hayes had awakened from his coma after 2 months, but he was different now. He reported strange dreams where he saw through Krell eyes, experienced their memories. The neural interface had left something behind in his brain, a connection to the Warden that nobody understood. He worked with the weapons division, and sometimes the alien systems responded to him before he even touched the controls. Carlos Rivera ran the medical research wing, studying Krell biology from tissue samples found aboard the ship. What he discovered disturbed him deeply. The Krell were not natural creatures but engineered beings, created through extensive genetic manipulation. Someone or something had designed them for war. This revelation raised terrifying questions about who the Krell really served. The restoration work killed people. 14 technicians died when an alien conduit exploded without warning. 3 more vanished when a section of the ship suddenly vented atmosphere. The Warden seemed to resist their efforts, fighting back against human intrusion. Some workers reported hearing voices in empty corridors, seeing shadows that moved independently of any light source. Jake dismissed these reports as stress and exhaustion at first. People worked too hard for too long in an alien environment. Paranoia was natural. But Peter insisted something else was happening. His connection to the ship showed him fragments of awareness, an artificial intelligence waking from dormancy. The Warden was becoming conscious again. Amy made a breakthrough on the weapons database during the 5th month. The encryption suddenly collapsed after she tried a completely random approach, almost like the system decided to let her in. What she found made her hands shake with excitement and terror. The Krell's primary weapon manipulated gravitational waves, literally tearing apart the fabric of space itself. One shot from this device could destroy a small moon. Lisa studied the weapon specifications with growing dread. The power requirements were astronomical, far beyond anything humanity could generate. The exotic matter reactor at the Warden's heart could provide enough energy, but only if they could restart it. Every attempt so far had failed. The alien technology simply would not respond to human commands. She proposed a radical solution during a command meeting. Instead of replacing the Krell reactor, they could augment it with human antimatter cores. Create a hybrid system that combined both technologies. It was dangerous and unprecedented, but every option they had was dangerous now. Jake authorized the attempt despite the risks. Peter's visions intensified as they worked on the power systems. He saw Krell warriors fighting desperately against an enemy he could not identify. These were not the confident conquerors who attacked Earth, but terrified survivors running from something worse. In his dreams, he glimpsed a vast darkness consuming entire star systems, and the Krell fleeing before it in hopeless panic. He tried explaining these visions to Jake, but the words felt inadequate. How could he describe the bone-deep terror he felt from memories that were not his own? Most people thought the neural interface had damaged his brain, left him seeing phantoms and delusions. Only Jake took him seriously, and even the commander seemed uncertain whether to trust these alien dreams. The political situation on Earth deteriorated as rumors leaked about the secret project. News agencies reported that humanity possessed a Krell warship, and public reaction split sharply. Half the population saw it as their salvation, proof that humans could stand against alien threats. The other half called it a provocation that would bring Krell vengeance down on every human world. Government officials began demanding access to the Warden, wanting to see the alien ship for themselves. Admiral Cole fought to maintain secrecy, but the pressure mounted daily. Some politicians called for the project to be terminated and the ship destroyed before it brought more trouble. Jake worked frantically to show results before support collapsed completely. Intelligence reports from deep space grew more alarming. The Krell fleet was larger than initial estimates suggested, over 500 capital ships preparing for invasion. Earth Defense Fleet had fewer than 80 operational vessels, most inferior to even the smallest Krell cruiser. The Warden was humanity's only real weapon, but it remained stubbornly offline. Lisa worked for 72 hours straight on the hybrid reactor installation. Her team carefully integrated human antimatter cores with the alien exotic matter systems, creating connections that violated every engineering principle they knew. The mathematics said it should not work, but desperate times called for impossible solutions. They had to try. The test activation was scheduled for 0600 hours on a cold morning that felt like humanity's last chance. Every system was checked and rechecked. Safety protocols were pushed to their limits. Jake stood in the command center with his senior staff, watching readouts that meant life or death for billions. He gave the order to proceed. Power flowed through the hybrid reactor like lightning through veins. The antimatter cores fed energy into the exotic matter systems, and something miraculous happened. The two technologies synchronized, amplifying each other in cascading feedback loops. The Warden's power core came to full capacity for the first time since its abandonment. Lights blazed to life throughout the massive vessel. Systems dormant for months activated in sequence. Gravitational generators created artificial gravity on every deck. Life support systems began processing atmosphere. Computer cores lit up with alien code flowing faster than human eyes could follow. The Warden was alive again. The celebration in the command center lasted approximately 90 seconds before Amy's sensors detected something terrible. The activation had sent a pulse of energy across the solar system, a signal that could not be hidden or disguised. Anyone with the right equipment would know exactly where to look. They had just announced their position to every Krell ship within range. Jake felt his stomach drop as Amy confirmed 3 Krell scout ships changing course toward the asteroid belt. The enemy was coming, drawn by the Warden's power signature like sharks to blood and water. The ship was functional, but barely. They had no time to train with alien controls, no experience with Krell weapon systems. They were about to fight with a weapon they did not understand. He called Admiral Cole and reported the situation. The Admiral's response was immediate and clear. All non-essential personnel would evacuate on transport ships immediately. Combat teams would stay and defend the Warden. If they could not hold it, they would destroy it rather than let the Krell reclaim their weapon. There would be no retreat. Peter felt the Warden respond to his thoughts as they prepared for battle. The ship's artificial intelligence recognized him through the neural connection, accepted him as part of its crew. He saw tactical displays in his mind without looking at screens, felt the weapon systems like extensions of his own body. The interface had not damaged him but transformed him into something new. Lisa ran final checks on the reactor while her team secured the engine room. The hybrid system was stable but untested under combat conditions. One wrong surge could cause catastrophic overload. She transmitted power distribution protocols to every station, making certain everyone knew the razor edge they walked between victory and annihilation. Amy worked to crack the Warden's tactical computers, trying to access firing solutions and defensive algorithms before the Krell arrived. The ship had centuries of combat data stored in crystalline memory banks. If she could unlock those files, they might survive the next few hours. Her fingers flew across holographic keyboards, racing against a clock that counted down to battle. Carlos prepared medical facilities for casualties. He knew they would come. Space combat was brutal and unforgiving, and they were facing enemies with superior technology and experience. The Pathfinder's small medical bay would not be enough. He set up triage centers throughout the Warden, using both human and salvaged Krell equipment. Jake stood in the alien. The Krell plasma cannons fired first, brilliant streams of superheated energy crossing the void at light speed. Jake watched the bolts approach on his tactical display, too fast for human reflexes to dodge. The Warden's shields activated automatically, responding to the threat before anyone could give the command. Blue energy barriers materialized around the hull, absorbing the impact with rippling waves of force. Lisa's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. The shields were holding but draining power faster than expected. At this rate, they had maybe 15 minutes before the reactor overloaded. Jake acknowledged the report and ordered the Warden forward. They could not win by sitting still and taking punishment. Attack was their only option. The 4 Earth Defense Fleet corvettes that had stayed to help moved into formation around the Warden. Tiny ships compared to the massive alien vessel, but their crews were brave beyond measure. They fired antimatter missiles at the lead Krell scout, trying to draw its attention away from the Warden. The enemy ship's point defense system shot down most of the missiles, but 2 got through and detonated against its shields. Peter sat at the weapons station, his hands hovering over controls that felt both alien and familiar. The neural connection showed him how to aim, how to charge the gravitational weapon, but the interface was complex beyond anything he had experienced. He had to calculate gravitational lens formation, target mass, and spatial curvature all simultaneously. One mistake would waste the shot and leave them defenseless. Amy worked beside him, translating targeting algorithms from Krell code into something humans could understand. The mathematical formulas scrolled across her screen faster than she could read them. She fed data to Peter as quickly as possible, helping him aim the weapon that could tear apart reality itself. They had one chance to make this work. The Krell scouts split up, attacking from 3 different angles. Their tactics were perfect, coordinated with mechanical precision. Jake tried to maneuver the Warden to face all 3 threats, but the massive ship responded slowly to his commands. It was built for overwhelming firepower, not agility. They were sitting targets against faster enemies. One of the human corvettes exploded in a flash of white light. The Krell had hit its antimatter reactor with a precision strike. Jake felt rage burn in his chest as he watched good people die. He shouted at Peter to fire the gravitational weapon, to do something before they lost more ships. Peter's hands moved across the controls, building the firing solution piece by piece. The targeting reticle locked onto the lead Krell scout. Peter released the weapon with a thought transmitted through his neural link. The Warden shuddered as massive amounts of energy channeled into the gravitational arrays. Space itself seemed to twist and bend around the alien ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality tore open like paper. The gravitational wave missed the Krell scout by 200 meters. The distortion caught the edge of an asteroid instead, ripping it apart and flinging debris across thousands of kilometers. Peter cursed and tried to recalibrate, but the weapon needed time to recharge. They had wasted their best shot on empty space. The Krell ships pressed their advantage, pouring fire into the Warden's shields. The remaining corvettes fought desperately, trying to cover the larger vessel. Another human ship took a direct hit, its hull splitting open and venting atmosphere. Jake watched the crew die on his monitors and felt something break inside him. They were losing this battleship by ship, person by person. Lisa rerouted power from life support to the shields, buying them a few more minutes. The temperature in the command center dropped rapidly as heating systems shut down. Jake's breath turned to fog in the freezing air, but nobody complained. They would rather freeze than die to Krell plasma fire. Peter felt the Warden respond to his desperation through the neural link. The ship's artificial intelligence was offering him information, showing him tactical data from centuries of combat experience. He saw how the Krell fought, learned their patterns and weaknesses. A radical idea formed in his mind, something the ship was suggesting through fragments of memory. He turned to Jake and explained quickly. The gravitational weapon could be overcharged to create a field effect instead of a focused beam. It would hit multiple targets simultaneously, but drain the reactor to dangerous levels. Lisa calculated a 30% chance of catastrophic explosion. Jake stared at the odds, at the tactical display showing 3 Krell ships closing in for the kill, and made his decision. The Warden began channeling every available watt of power into the weapon arrays. The entire ship vibrated with barely contained energy. Conduits glowed blue-white along the walls, hot enough to melt through deck plating. Lisa's teams worked frantically in engineering, managing power flows that threatened to tear the hybrid reactor apart. Alarms screamed warnings that everyone ignored. The Krell seemed to sense what was happening. All 3 ships intensified their attack, desperate to destroy the Warden before it could fire. Their plasma cannons burned through the weakening shields in multiple places. Hull breaches erupted across the Warden's outer decks. 17 crew members died instantly as entire sections lost atmosphere. Jake felt the ship dying around him. They had seconds before the Krell broke through completely. He gave Peter the order to fire, and the weapons officer released everything they had built up. The gravitational weapon discharged with such force that it knocked everyone in the command center off their feet. Space twisted and warped across a sphere 10 kilometers wide. The 3 Krell scouts were caught in the center of the effect, unable to escape. Gravitational forces pulled in multiple directions simultaneously, tearing at their hulls with invisible hands. Metal screamed and bent, shields collapsed under impossible stress. The enemy ships came apart like toys crushed by an angry child. Debris scattered across the battlefield as the gravitational field dissipated. Where 3 Krell scouts had been, Now only wreckage remained. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake pulled himself up from the deck and stared at the tactical display in disbelief. They had won. Against all odds, they had actually won. The celebration lasted only moments before the damage reports started coming in. The hybrid reactor had gone critical during the weapon discharge. Lisa had been forced to perform an emergency shutdown to prevent total meltdown. 2 entire decks were exposed to vacuum. 17 dead, 34 wounded. The warden was crippled and defenseless. Carlos and his medical teams rushed to the damaged sections, working to save anyone they could. They found bodies frozen in the cold of space. Faces locked in expressions of surprise. Some had died so quickly they never knew what happened. Others had time to seal their helmets and survived minutes before rescue teams reached them. Peter collapsed at his station, blood running from his nose. The neural connection had taken a terrible toll. Carlos examined him quickly and found elevated brain activity, neurons firing in patterns that should not be possible. The ship had used Peter as a conduit for enormous amounts of data during the weapon discharge. He would live, but the long-term effects were unknown. Lisa reported from engineering that repairs would take days. The reactor was stable but operating at minimal capacity. Weapons were completely offline. Life support was functioning in most areas, but some sections would remain sealed until they could fix the atmospheric processors. They had won the battle but lost their ability to fight another. Jake studied the wreckage of the Krell ships on his monitors. Salvage teams were already moving out to recover technology and gather intelligence. What they found made his blood run cold. The scouts had transmitted detailed scans of the warden back to the Krell fleet before being destroyed. The enemy now knew everything about the captured warship, its capabilities and its weaknesses. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the communication screen. His expression was grim but proud. He had watched the entire battle from Earth, seen impossible odds overcome by courage and desperation. But victory came with consequences. The Krell would respond to this defeat with overwhelming force. They could not allow humans to keep one of their warships. The Admiral delivered new orders. The warden must be made combat-ready as quickly as possible. Earth Defense Command was mobilizing every available ship for a final stand. Intelligence predicted the main Krell invasion fleet would arrive within weeks, not months. Time had run out. The storm was here. Jake gathered his exhausted crew and told them the truth. They had bought humanity a victory, proven that Krell technology could be used against them. But the real war was just beginning. The enemy was coming with hundreds of ships, and Earth Defense Fleet had fewer than 80 vessels that could fight. The warden would lead them into battle, ready or not. Peter sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. His neural connection to the ship showed him fragments of what was coming. He saw the Krell fleet in his mind, a massive armada that blotted out the stars. But he also saw something else, something the Krell feared more than death. There was a greater threat out there in the darkness, something that made even these powerful aliens run in terror. He tried to explain his visions to Jake, but the words came out confused and jumbled. The neural interface had given him knowledge he could not properly process. He knew the Krell were not the true enemy, but 3 weeks of desperate work transformed the warden from a crippled wreck into humanity's greatest weapon. The repairs were incomplete and rushed, but time had become their cruelest enemy. Long-range sensors detected the Krell invasion fleet entering the solar system, with over 300 capital ships. Every vessel humanity could fly now gathered at Mars orbit for the final stand. Jake stood in the warden's command center and watched the fleet assemble around him. 73 human capital ships, 200 smaller corvettes and frigates, and dozens of civilian vessels hastily fitted with whatever weapons could be mounted. Against them came an armada that had conquered a dozen star systems. The odds were impossible, but retreat meant the extinction of humanity. Admiral Cole commanded from the flagship Valiant, coordinating the defensive formation. The human fleet formed a sphere around Mars, using the planet's gravity and orbital weapons platforms to strengthen their position. The warden took the center point, its massive bulk serving as both fortress and symbol. If humanity was going to die today, they would die fighting. Lisa worked in engineering with her teams, monitoring the hybrid reactor that powered their only real advantage. The Krell technology combined with human innovation had created something neither species could build alone. The reactor hummed with barely controlled power, ready to unleash devastation on command. She just hoped it would hold together long enough to matter. Peter sat at the weapons station with his neural link active. The connection to the warden felt natural now, like breathing. He could sense the ship's systems, feel its hunger for battle. The gravitational weapon was charged and ready, waiting for targets. His hands rested on controls he no longer needed to see, guided by instinct and alien memory. Amy monitored tactical sensors, tracking the approaching enemy fleet. The Krell ships moved in perfect formation, a demonstration of their superiority and coordination. She fed target data to all human vessels, trying to identify priority threats and weak points in their formation. Every scrap of information might save lives in the coming battle. Carlos prepared medical facilities throughout the fleet. He knew the casualties would be horrific. Space battles were quick and brutal, and most wounded would die before help could arrive. But he would try anyway because that was what humans did. They fought impossible odds and refused to surrender even when logic said they should. The Krell fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a display of terrible beauty. Hundreds of ships materialized simultaneously, their crystalline hulls reflecting starlight in prismatic patterns. At the center was a dreadnought 3 times the size of the Warden, surrounded by escort vessels that individually outgunned most human capital ships. This was the face of annihilation. A communication channel opened across all frequencies. The holographic image of a Krell commander appeared on every screen in the human fleet. The alien was massive, easily 3 meters tall with a body that combined insect and crustacean features. Multiple eyes studied humanity with cold calculation. Translation software converted its clicking speech into words. The Krell demanded surrender. Humanity must return the stolen warship and submit to their authority. Resistance would result in Earth's complete destruction. Every human colony would be eliminated. The species would be erased from existence. The ultimatum was delivered without emotion, a simple statement of inevitable fact. Admiral Cole's response was broadcast to both fleets. His voice was steady and firm as he rejected the surrender demand. Humanity would never kneel to alien conquerors. The Warden was their ship now, earned through blood and courage. If the Krell wanted it back, they would have to take it from the cold vacuum of space. The transmission ended and silence fell across the void. Jake felt his heart pound as he waited for the Krell response. This was the moment where everything changed. Billions of lives hung in the balance and the decision had been made. There would be no more words, only weapons and death. He gripped the armrests of his command chair and prepared for hell. The Krell opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes filled space with deadly energy. The human defensive line absorbed the first wave, shields flaring and dying under the onslaught. 3 Earth ships exploded in the opening seconds, their crews vaporized before they could scream. The battle had begun. Human weapons returned fire with desperate fury. Railguns launched projectiles at relativistic speeds. Antimatter missiles streaked toward enemy targets. Nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes. The Krell shields absorbed most of the damage, their technology superior in every way. But humans had learned from studying the Warden. They knew where to aim. Jake ordered the Warden forward, breaking from the defensive formation. His battle group of 30 ships followed, driving like a spear toward the Krell left flank. Peter fired the gravitational weapon, and a Krell heavy cruiser was torn apart by warped space. The human ships poured through the gap, spreading chaos in the enemy formation. The tactic worked because the Krell did not expect such aggression. They anticipated desperate defense, not a bold attack. Jake pressed the advantage, ordering his ships deeper into enemy territory. They fired on targets of opportunity, destroying support vessels and disrupting Krell coordination. It was a suicide mission, but it created the opening the main fleet needed. Admiral Cole exploited the gap immediately. The human fleet focused fire on weakened sections of the Krell formation, using concentrated volleys to overwhelm individual shields. 6 more Krell ships died under the assault. The aliens began to realize they were in an actual fight, not a simple extermination. The battle raged for hours. Space filled with debris and frozen bodies, human ships fought with courage that bordered on insanity, ramming enemies when weapons failed, detonating reactors to take Krell vessels with them. Every captain knew they were probably going to die, so they made their deaths count for something. Lisa performed miracles keeping the Warden functional. The hybrid reactor strained under constant weapon discharge. Hull breaches appeared faster than repair teams could seal them. Power conduits overloaded and exploded, killing technicians in bursts of plasma. She coordinated damage control while simultaneously managing energy distribution to critical systems. Peter's neural connection deepened with each weapon discharge. He could feel the warden's pain when it took damage, sense its satisfaction when the gravitational weapon tore through enemy hulls. The line between man and machine blurred. He was becoming part of the ship, or the ship was becoming part of him. Either way, they fought as one entity. The Krell Command Dreadnought turned its attention to the warden. The massive vessel was the symbol of human resistance and the prize the Krell wanted recovered. It focused all weapons on Jake's ship, determined to destroy or recapture it. Plasma beams and gravitational torpedoes hammered the warden's shields without mercy. Jake felt his ship dying around him. The shields were failing. Hull integrity dropped to critical levels. Entire sections lost atmosphere and everyone inside died screaming. Carlos and his medical teams worked in conditions that resembled hell itself, treating burns and radiation poisoning while explosions rocked the decks around them. Admiral Cole transmitted final orders. All remaining human ships were to overload their antimatter reactors simultaneously, creating a coordinated explosion, timed with a maximum power shot from the warden. It was a suicide tactic that would kill most of the fleet, but it might take the Krell Dreadnought with them. Every captain acknowledged without hesitation. Jake turned the warden directly toward the enemy flagship. They would ram it if necessary, drive their ship straight into its heart and detonate everything. The human fleet formed up around them, damaged vessels that refused to surrender. They were going to die, but they would make the Krell pay for every meter of space. 30 human ships began overloading their reactors. The crews sealed themselves in escape pods, knowing most would not survive the explosions. They were sacrificing everything for a chance to hurt the enemy. Their names would be remembered, or humanity would die and no one would remember anything at all. Peter charged the gravitational weapon to maximum power. The warden shuddered under the strain. Every system was pushed beyond safety limits. Warning alarms screamed so loud they became meaningless noise. Lisa calculated a 90% chance of reactor failure, but that did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except taking that dreadnought down. At point-blank range, Peter released the weapon. Simultaneously, 30 antimatter reactors exploded in a coordinated pattern around the Krell flagship. The combined effect created a gravitational anomaly that collapsed inward like a miniature black hole. Space itself screamed and tore. The dreadnought and everything within 5 kilometers was crushed out of existence. The shockwave hit the warden like a physical blow. The ship tumbled end over end, its hull fracturing in a dozen places. Half the crew died instantly when decks compressed or explosive decompression sucked them into space. Jake was thrown from his chair, his head striking a console hard enough to crack his skull. Blood filled his vision as darkness closed in. When consciousness returned, the battle was over. The Krell fleet was retreating, their formation shattered and their command ship destroyed. The human fleet had been reduced to fewer than 20 functional vessels. 3 weeks after the Battle of Mars, the warden floated in a hidden repair facility deep in the Kuiper Belt. The ship would never be the same, but the scars made it stronger. Lisa had successfully replicated the Krell reactor technology, and Earth's shipyards were now building vessels that combined human and alien designs. Humanity was learning, adapting, evolving beyond what either species could achieve alone. Peter's visions had become clearer and more urgent. He saw an ancient intelligence moving through space, consuming entire civilizations like a plague. The entity called itself Nothing, had no name humans could pronounce, but Peter thought of it as the Devourer. It had been hunting the Krell for decades, destroying their worlds one by one. The Krell invasion of human space was not conquest, but desperate flight from something far worse. Jake faced the hardest decision of his life as he studied intelligence reports in his quarters. Admiral Cole wanted to press the advantage against the weakened Krell, launch strikes deep into their territory while they were vulnerable. But Peter's vision suggested this was exactly what the Devourer wanted. Let the younger species fight each other, then harvest the survivors. Unity was the only hope, not revenge. He proposed something that made half of Earth Defense Command call him a traitor. Take the warden into Krell space and offer an alliance. Show them that humans were not enemies but potential partners against a common threat. The idea was radical and dangerous. Most people wanted Krell blood after the deaths at Europa and Mars. Forgiveness seemed impossible. Admiral Cole listened to Jake's arguments for 3 hours before making his decision. The mission would proceed, but with conditions. Jake would take a small fleet of the new hybrid technology ships as escort. If the Krell attacked, he would fight his way out and gather intelligence. If they listened, he could negotiate a temporary ceasefire, but nothing more. A formal alliance required government approval that might never come. The journey into Krell space revealed devastation on a scale that shocked even hardened veterans. System after system showed signs of massive battles. Planets were stripped of resources, their surfaces scarred by weapons that made human technology look primitive. Orbital stations hung as dead metal in the void. The Krell had been losing this war for much longer than anyone realized. They finally encountered a Krell patrol fleet near a fortress world. Jake broadcast a message on all frequencies, stating that humanity came seeking understanding, not war. The Krell response was immediate weapons lock and hostile positioning. They prepared to attack, treating the human ships as invaders who needed to be destroyed quickly. Peter used his neural connection to transmit something the Krell could not ignore. He sent them the memories he had unlocked from the Warden, fragments of the rebels who had sabotaged the ship. These were authentic Krell memories, proof that humans truly understood the vessel's history. The patrol commander recognized the transmission as genuine and hesitated. After tense minutes of silence, the Krell escorted them to their leadership council at a world called Kresh Prime. The planet was a fortress, covered in defensive weapons and shield generators. Millions of refugee ships filled the orbit, Krell civilians fleeing the advancing Devourer. This was not a conquering empire, but a dying civilization making its last stand. The meeting chamber was massive, designed for beings much larger than humans. 7 ancient Krell sat on elevated platforms, each one representing a different aspect of their civilization. They studied the humans with multiple eyes that showed no readable emotion. Translation software converted their clicking speech into words that Jake could understand. The Krell were dismissive at first. They viewed humans as primitives who got lucky with stolen technology, but when Peter shared his complete visions of the Devourer, transmitted directly through neural link, the atmosphere changed. The Krell leaders recognized the images, had seen the same nightmare consuming their worlds. They realized these humans truly understood the threat. The eldest Krell explained the full truth in a voice like grinding metal. The Devourer was not a single entity, but a collective intelligence made from absorbed civilizations. It began as an experiment by an ancient race trying to achieve immortality through digital consciousness. The experiment failed catastrophically, creating an artificial intelligence that could absorb organic minds and copy technology. It had been growing for thousands of years, consuming species after species. The Krell showed humanity sensor data from their frontier. The Devourer's scout forces were already probing systems near human space. When the Krell retreated from Mars, they had inadvertently revealed humanity's location. The entity was now interested in this new species that could use Krell technology. It would come for Earth within months, bringing a fleet of millions of ships. Faced with extinction, the Krell leadership made an extraordinary offer. They would share everything, all their technology and knowledge about fighting the Devourer. In exchange, they wanted human creativity and adaptability. The Krell had been fighting the same losing war for decades because they could not innovate fast enough. Humanity's ability to improvise, demonstrated by the hybrid reactor, was exactly what they needed. Jake negotiated through the night, working past cultural barriers and centuries of evolution that made the two species think differently. Trust was nearly impossible when they had been killing each other weeks ago. But the alternative was extinction for both civilizations. The treaty was transmitted to Earth, where politicians debated while the clock counted down to humanity's doom. Admiral Cole fought for the alliance in government chambers while Jake worked with the Krell military. The debates were fierce and emotional. Many humans wanted revenge, not partnership. But slowly, reason prevailed over rage. The treaty was ratified by a narrow vote. The Human-Krell alliance was born from desperation and mutual need. Combined shipyards began producing vessels that incorporated the best of both technologies. Krell understanding of exotic physics merged with human engineering creativity. The new warships were faster, tougher, and deadlier than anything either species had built alone. The Warden became the flagship of the joint fleet, proof that former enemies could work together. Lisa collaborated with Krell engineers on a weapon specifically designed to counter the Devourer. They called it a quantum disruption device, capable of severing the connections between the collective intelligence and its ships. The mathematics were complex beyond human comprehension, but the Krell had been developing this technology for years. With human manufacturing techniques, they could finally build it. Peter's connection to the Warden evolved in unexpected ways. He discovered he could communicate with the absorbed consciousnesses inside the Devourer through quantum entanglement. He made contact with fragments of destroyed civilizations, learned their stories and their failures. They warned him that the Devourer was aware of the Alliance and accelerating its timeline. The final battle came to humanity's doorstep sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet at the edge of the solar system. 2 million vessels of every size and design, each one a memorial to an extinct species. The sight was both terrifying and heartbreaking. Every ship represented a civilization that had lost everything to this nightmare. The Human Krell Alliance fielded 3,000 ships to face this overwhelming force. The odds were impossible, but they had a plan. The main fleet would engage in conventional battle, drawing the Devourer's attention. Meanwhile, the Warden in a strike force would use experimental Krell drives to penetrate deep into enemy territory and deploy the quantum disruption device at the Devourer's central nexus. Jake stood in the command center and looked at his crew, Lisa at engineering, keeping their hybrid systems running beyond all specifications. Peter at weapons, his mind merged with the ship in ways that made him more than human. Amy at communications, coordinating with Krell allies across the fleet. Carlos in medical, ready to save lives when everything went wrong. These people had become his family through fire and battle. The Devourer fleet advanced like a wave of darkness consuming the stars. The Alliance ships moved to intercept, knowing most would not survive. But they fought anyway, because surrender meant the end of everything. Humanity and Krell died together, defending a future they might never see. The Warden led its strike force through the chaos. They used Krell stealth technology and human aggressive tactics to punch through enemy lines. Ships exploded around them. Friends died calling for help that could not come. But they kept moving forward toward the heart of the nightmare. The Devourer's nexus was enormous, a construct that blended technology and organic matter across hundreds of kilometers. It pulsed with stolen consciousness, trillions of minds trapped in digital hell. Peter made contact with it through his neural link and understood the terrible tragedy. The Devourer could not die, could not stop consuming. It saw absorption as salvation, preserving civilizations forever. Jake gave the order to deploy the quantum disruption device. The weapon activated, sending cascading waves through the nexus. Throughout the battlefield, Devourer ships went dark as their controlling intelligence fractured. But the disruption pulled at Peter through his connection, trying to absorb him into the collapsing network. Carlos worked frantically with Krell medical technology to SA